sells during the week. This is his parnasa.
We're live.
And
Can I have the tripod?
are you also live? Or two?
Oh, you were on the side or you were on something else? Facebook. On the Facebook Live. Regular Facebook Live or the this one, the site, the actual
Pick one of them.
Facebook Live.
Pick one of them.
Yeah, you do it.
So, when we're dealing here with merchandise, the question is merchandise muktzah? Let's say somebody forgot to, someone is making a kiddush or making a meal at home, and they ran out of hummus. So in your regular house, okay, you won't have hummus this Shabbos. What if you have 100 people by your, okay, you won't have hummus this Shabbos. What if you have 100 people by your kiddush, you don't have hummus, you don't have tchina, you don't have this, you don't have that, something happened to the food, you don't have challahs, can you go ahead to a store and get this merchandise, or is the merchandise considered muktzah store? Now, why would merchandise be muktzah? Yeah, you know the owner lives over here, you go to his house, so listen, we ran out of this and that, or we need disposables, we need disposable vessels, cups, plates, forks, we're making a kiddush, can we go over to a store, to the owner, and he'll give it to us on credit, of course, we're going to pay him after Shabbos, we're not going to pay him on Shabbos, but the question here is a muktzah question, are these items muktzah? So why would they be muktzah? So I'll tell you this like this, any vessel that has been set aside from being used, such as vessels that are designated for sale, merchandise, business, do the owners of stores open up the products that they have and use them and then put it back and sell them? Absolutely not. Are they particular? Well, usually. So he writes like this. If, and with today's form of marketing and sales, this is very rare. Maybe in a third world country this would still apply. Person who owns a business, owns a store, sells merchandise, and while in general he doesn't use it as part of his own items, nonetheless, if he had to take a drink, he wouldn't mind taking the glass cup that's on for sale and drink it and then put it back. Or use one of the pots, cook in it and then put it back. So if a person is not particular against using the merchandise and then returning it for sale, then it wouldn't be muktzah because maybe he needs to use it on Shabbos. He didn't remove his mind from it on Shabbos. The Medvar Mokisur, he gives a specific qualification to that. I'm going to skip it because it's not very relevant. And then he goes to the case of if you are particular not to use it. Daled. V'chol ha'kelim, and all the vessels, which are set aside for business, as merchandise, and he is particular to not use them for any purpose. Even if these vessels are not very expensive, how much does a glass cup cost? 3 shekel, 4 shekel? Not very expensive. And it goes without saying if they are very expensive vessels, even if they are not set aside for merchandise, it is forbidden to move them on Shabbos. So we read a few things here. We're going to focus specifically on the merchandise and then move on to the second aspect. So here the Alter between Sif, Gimel, and Daled makes a distinction regarding merchandise between if the owner is particular not to use it, meaning even he himself, or if he's not particular. And I think we can agree in most cases the owner is certainly particular, especially that today most things come in a wrapping, and if you open it, it basically becomes like secondhand. It loses a certain percentage of its value, and definitely the owner would be very particular, even if it's not very expensive, against using it at all, and therefore it's set aside from his mind. So basically the general rule would be is that merchandise that's meant for sale is muktzah on Shabbos. you think of an example of merchandise that owners aren't so particular in? They'll use it and then they'll sell it?
Mezuzahs, no.
Mezuzahs. I'm not talking about secondhand.
Yeah.
Well, if you can think of it, then it would fall under that and it would be mutter. It wouldn't be muksa. But unless it's muksa for other reasons, like it's a cell phone.
But the buyer is the one who would care. What would the owner care? The buyer cares about getting something that was
It
unwrapped.
doesn't matter, but who owns it right now? The owner. So if it's set aside from his mind, right? So it's muksa. Okay, so that's the general rule, and this type of muksa we call muksa machmas chisaron kis. It is muksa due to, meaning it's set aside from one's mind. What's the reason that it's muksa, that it's set aside from our mind? Which is in general the common denominator between all muksa, is that there's a certain amount of negation or forgetfulness of this item during Shabbos. The whole idea of mukta is that items which don't really have a use for me, so I'm just not really thinking about them, are considered mukta, set aside, and have different levels and gradations of restrictions. So the highest form of mukta would be an item that is completely set aside from my mind from use.
In this category or going beyond this category now?
I'm just saying, if we say the common denominator of all mukta categories is that to a certain extent they are set aside from my mind, they are not thought of because why would I need to use it on Shabbos? Or how can I use it on Shabbos? Then if something is more set aside from my mind than something else, it would have a greater restriction of muktzah. And that's this case right here. Right here we reach the most far off my mind category. And the reason is because since its purpose is for sale, and I don't sell on Shabbos, it's completely off my mind. It has no use for me, unless I'm not particular against using it. If I'm not particular during the week against using it, so I can use it on Shabbos as well for personal use.
What about the
But
countervailing?
if I am,
Corkscrew.
so if a store owner would not use his corkscrew opener because it's for sale, then yes, it would be muktzah because it's set aside. It's a merchandise, and he doesn't want it to be used because that will diminish its value or make it unable to be sold. It'll make it secondhand, and it's a loss of money. So this is called muktzah machas chisaron kis.
In this case, isn't the person coming to say, I will buy this from you ultimately, but I'm going to use it on Shabbos before I actually make the purchase? I thought
Yeah,
that would...
well, that's the situation usually, or the owner himself. The owner himself is making a kiddush. And oh my gosh, I don't have, let me go to my store and get a few, disposables. 1 second, owner. Would you ever during the week go ahead and use it and then put it back for sale? Absolutely not. Well, then it's muktzah for you.
Okay.
You have a problem.
Okay. Now, there's many items that meet this category. This is not an obscure category. So are you going to name some? Here's some other...
Well, these are the rules. You got to attach the dots. That's the whole point. We're giving you the tools or the rules to be able to implement.
Okay.
But you're right. Most products today would fall under this because it's closed. You open it, or we don't want it to get dirty, be used.
No, this general category of muksa, this is the most extreme off my mind. But
We're going to add more to it, yes. We're now dealing with merchandise. Merchandise is our first example of what would be muksa machas chisaron kis, muksa due to it's untouchable on Shabbos because its use is for during the week for sale, and on Shabbos I will not use it because I don't want to diminish its value. Okay, now what about food? What about, as we said, let's say the guy, he needs a few hummuses, he needs a few breads for Shabbos. Is that also muktzah?
Under that rule, it would seem, applying those guidelines, it would seem so, very much so.
So let's see 310, halacha 2. So when it comes to food with Jews, there's very different laws. He writes like this, a general rule. Kol davar shaloi la'achilu b'Shabbos. Any item that's edible on Shabbos, ein b'din muktzah, never becomes muktzah. Afilu ho'ayim b'schayra, even if it's merchandise. Kagayt, mamushkeit, and someone who sells pitzuchim, someone who sells almonds and dates, sharpeiros and other fruits. He himself sells it, or he's a merchant who sells to the stores. He's the middleman. Mutter lechol mehem b'Shabbos. They're not muktzah on Shabbos. It's permitted to consume them on Shabbos.
And then you're spanning not only this more obscure case of merchandise, but you're saying food generally falls under the potentially machmas case.
Well, he's saying no. Even food that was set aside as merchandise, said edible food never becomes muktzah on Shabbos.
Okay.
Even food that was set aside as merchandise does not become muktzah
Okay. And of
on
course,
Shabbos.
then
So
the
give some
shells.
more examples.
So now we know that this could have been, we could have suspected food as being part of this category, but you were saying
Correct,
it's not.
because that's what we said before, right? I set it aside, I'm not gonna open it up, partake in it, so why is it different? So we're gonna see.
So food is not considered muksa machmas kisarim kiss.
Correct. There's no food that's considered muksa machmas kiss, it doesn't exist. Unless the food is not edible, that's a different story. But if it's edible food is never considered muksa machmas kiss.
Right, regardless of the merchandise issue.
For example, if we have raw meat of a merchant, then that would be considered muktzah for several reasons. One of them would also be muktzah machmas kiss.
Not edible.
It's raw, it's not edible in Shabbos, correct. But if it's edible food, it's not considered pushed away from the mind. Let's see why.
Right. And then we're talking about anything in your house. Don't forget about the merchandise issue. We're just talking about any food, anytime is edible.
Correct.
Not, unless we're talking about shells and things like this that
That's
are
not edible.
Right.
Mutter l'taltalan. What's the reason? Let's see, it says here. Says that the reason is that they're not similar to other items which one physically sets aside, being that even though one has physically set them aside, one has not removed his mind from them completely. So by food we say that so long as it's edible, a person doesn't completely remove his mind from it. It's not like an item which we do say that concept, such as merchandise I spoke of earlier, you are particular not to open it, so it's considered muksa machmas kiss. It's the highest category of muksa. But these type of things, even after a person pushes them away, meaning the merchandise, it's food, it's edible, a person still thinks of eating it. That's really the rule. Now, we can argue on this logic, but that's the logic that the sages brought down as a psychology of a person. That a human, a Jew, person doesn't push away food, even if it's edible food, even if it's merchandise. Okay, so in the case that I mentioned, if you need some hummus, it is permitted for him to go ahead and get it. It is not considered muktzah. So on and so forth with other.
My phone got really hot. The broadcast failed. I'm not allowing this. I'll get this off somehow.
All right. Okay, so again, in a practical situation, you would be able to go to the store owner and get whatever food that's edible you can eat on Shabbos so it doesn't receive a muktzah status.
Or a next door neighbor?
Well, the next door neighbor, why would food be muktzah by him? Is he selling the food? Here, the whole thing is that it's set aside, it's for sale.
Okay, so a next door neighbor's food is just like your food that's edible. In other words,
100%.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, just thought I'd test it out. Like you weren't thinking that you'd use your neighbor's food.
Right, correct, okay, yes. Okay, so that's regarding merchandise. That's our first example of what would fall under muksa machmas kiss, and now we're going to get a second example. And from all the examples is how we create the general rule and then can connect dots to other cases. The next example we read was as follows. All expensive vessels, even if they are not merchandise, but they are designated for a prohibited use, and is particular not to use them for other usages, in order so their value does not diminish. Aslo Tal to Shabbos. It is forbidden to be moved on Shabbos. Okay, so we'll get to that part later, the specific restriction. But this is going to be our main rule right here, what we just learned. The Alter Rebbe wrote like this, that an expensive item, okay, even if it's not merchandise, it's in your house, you don't plan on selling it, it's yours. But it's designated for forbidden use. Okay, its designation is not for something that you're halachically allowed to use on Shabbos. Let's just give a practical example which is brought here. A shechita knife, you cannot slaughter on Shabbos. A slaughter knife is very expensive, and it has to be sharpened and smoothened in a very specific way to meet kosher standards. And therefore, a sheichid, a slaughterer, is very particular not to use that knife for any other purpose. He doesn't want to ruin his hard work.
You can't slaughter on Shabbos under any circumstances. Why don't I think we had a case once where you talked about
That's for an ill person that's
right,
deathly
okay.
ill.
Got it.
But in the normal circumstance, you cannot slaughter on Shabbos. So, what's the status of this knife? So the answer is that this knife would fall under Muksa, Machas, Chisar, and Kiss. It's another example of this very high-level state of Muksa. Why is it Muksa? Because its designation is for a prohibited use. So I don't plan on using it for its designated use. So it's already off my mind. Furthermore, it's completely off my mind because I'm particular not to use it for any other use. It's not like we're going to see other items, which are klish nachtalis, or which I can't use it for the designated use, so it's a little bit off my mind. But there are other usages that can come up with it that I may choose to use it for. That I may choose to use it for.
Yeah, camera.
Right. Oh, a camera. You don't need a camera.
Or a phone.
I should look at the camera.
No. Camera or phone.
That you're saying that you would. Well, we're going to go through those examples and debate what they should fall under. But the difference between Muksa, Machas, and Kiss and one of the lower level Muksas, which is called Klisha Malachta Le'isr, is on the second aspect. The first aspect they're equal in. They are designated for a use that I can't, halachically may not use it for on Shabbos. I cannot use a hammer to bang nails in the wall on Shabbos. That's its designated use. I cannot use the shechita knife to slaughter on Shabbos, designated use. Where they will part those two items is, am I particular not to use it for other things? I'm not going to go ahead and use my shechita knife to cut tomatoes. I will go ahead and use my hammer to break open shells, pistachios or almonds. So that's the difference that makes the big difference between what level of muktzah they will receive. So this way of defining muktzah, machzah, chesed, and kiss is unique to the Alter Rebbe. Not everyone writes it in this way. Not everyone adds those important words. Kalisha malachta le'isr makes its two steps. A, it's designated for forbidden use. B, you won't use it for anything else. The source of the Alter Rebbe is in the Rush, but I'm just saying in other classical places they don't bring this exact definition from the Rush. The Alter Rebbe does. And what this does for us is it gives a very specific definition, and of course what would not fall under this category, such as, for example, if I have a very expensive vase on my table, is it Muksa Shabbos? I don't use it for anything else. I just use it for the fake flowers that are there because I don't want to touch it. It's so expensive. I'm afraid it'll fall, so it's just set there the whole time. Is it considered muktzah? So according to the Alter Rebbe, way of definition, which would be the answer.
Okay, so let's go through one by one. In the first category, I wonder already, because the vase could be used.
Is a vase designated for forbidden use?
No.
Flowers. So
Flowers.
you already lost the first step.
Yeah, it's not even.
So is it muktzah?
No.
If you skip the first step and you say, no, muktzah's machmas, chesed, and kiss is simply items that are very expensive and you're careful not to play around with because you don't want to damage them, then an expensive vase would fall under that category.
But the Alter Rebbe doesn't hold that way.
The Alter Rebbe explicitly writes in the conditions it has to be klisha malachta le'isr. He defines it. It's an item that's for forbidden use, and then it goes up. We're going to see many examples here that we're going to see debates on amongst authorities of what their status of muktzah is, and it's going to be a difference of opinion based on this point.
By the way, why wouldn't we, Likvot Shabbos Kodesh, why wouldn't we use an expensive, beautiful, nice thing? Why wouldn't that overcome the worry about?
Correct. That's in essence the logic behind the Alter Rebbe's opinion. The logic behind the Alter Rebbe's opinion, as explained the number of poskim, is that if it's designated for permitted use, then the decorative aspect of it is the use that you don't set aside. That is its use. So it's not set aside from my mind.
Well, it could be an ugly vase that it would not be set aside because you want to put flowers in the vase on Shabbos, and then you have the extra thing of it being expensive, and there is with a Likvot Shabbos, how much more so I want to use it and not put it aside. Oh, yeah.
Right. So we're going to see later, we're going to see more examples later on as we get through. Okay, so this is our new, basically our main definition. That's an expensive item that Klish Nacht L'Isser doesn't forbid use, which you're particularly against using for other things.
What's another example of an expensive item?
We're going to see many.
Okay.
Many examples.
By the way, because this is the Alter Rebbe's opinion, you see in certain homes it didn't go by the Alter Rebbe nor the general that they don't allow a vase, an expensive vase. There's places where they would hold by not people and they wouldn't use it.
Possibly, yes. There would be people who won't be machmer, yeah. Okay, so now what is the halacha of an item that's defined in Musnach Chesron Kiss? What is its status of monk? We said what its definition is. What is its status? Here the Alter Rebbe writes that anything that falls into this category is forbidden to be moved on Shabbos, afilu tzorech mekayme, even for use of its space. So let's say this shechita knife is sitting on the table, and I need to put down the food. I cannot move the shechita knife, even though I'm saying, but I'm not moving it for the sake of the knife, I'm moving it for the sake of the food.
Because it's so high level.
Correct. Or if, let's say, the sheikh says, you know what, I have complete regret of the way I've acted with the shechita knife, I'm going to now allow it to be used for the vegetable salad. If he decides to do that before Shabbos, we'll see, there's what to talk about. On Shabbos, there's nothing to talk about. It was Muksa bein hashmashos. Bein hashmashos, when Shabbos came in. This was completely set aside. It's a done deal for the rest of Shabbos. You can use your regrets starting Motzei Shabbos for the next week.
If you needed a prayer book that happened to be under it because you very...
Well, we already learned about that. We said before in the rules of Muksa, right? I'm allowed to remove something from on top or under Muksa, even if it shakes. It's for the sake of the Muksa, for the sake of the non-Muksa.
Yeah, one might think this is so high level you couldn't do that.
Right. No.
That's
the
not
rules I emphasize apply in all cases, in all categories.
So you got a sitter that you don't want to use. The knife is sitting on top, and you can pull it out from under the knife, or the other way around if you had.
Correct. Or if you plan on using it for its own use, which here the Alter Rebbe brings up the question, how does this make sense? We just said you're particular not to use it for anything else, and it's forbidden to use it for its own use. So what do you want to use it for? So he says, meaning he changed his mind. He said, okay, I'm not going to be particular anymore. I am going to use this for something else.
Before Shabbos, then?
No, on Shabbos. So he's saying, if a person decides to do them on Shabbos, it still remains muksa, so it doesn't help.
Oh, right.
Even the reason that it's muksa is because I'm particular not to use for anything else. And now I've decided to make a use of it that's not its designated use, or not particular. Nonetheless, since it was muksa by Shabbos, it's no good.
I got a problem. What about a moil? He finds out on Shabbos morning there's a bris to do.
All right, so that, we mentioned that last week shortly, and that's discussed in chapter 331, the laws of the bris on Shabbos. And there it's explained that the milah knife is muktzah, but the same way we permit an actual bris milah on Shabbos, which is an isser of making a chabura, that's a biblical melacha, so too we permit the lesser prohibition of muktzah, which is only rabbinical. Nonetheless, that milah knife would retain its muktzah status in terms of that as soon as he puts it down, it's muktzah again, and he can't pick it up anymore. As soon as he finishes the bris, either he puts it down right away in a safe area, or in other words, if you put it down without placing it in its final destination, you can no longer bring it to its final destination, because it's ideally muktzah. For the sake of the bris, we allowed you to move it. For after the bris, it's already done. What are you moving it for? You want to save it, you're afraid of damage. Sorry. You can move with a shino, of course, you can use all the tricks, all the rules, but in its regular method, it cannot be moved. However, this is only in the case that a person changed his mind after Tzeisik Chava. after nightfall. If, however, one changes mind while it's still daytime, meaning before Shabbos, so it's permitted to be moved, as one's thought can change a status of muktzah. So here the Alter says is that the whole idea of muktzah is in the head, it's psychological. If it's pushed off from you, it's muktzah. If it's not pushed off from you, it's not muktzah. So muktzah is also something, it's something that's very subjective. It could be subjective, could be objective. It depends on the type of muktzah, but ideally it's subjective to the person's personal dealings with this item. So in general, we can say a shechita knife is muktzah, but that would not be correct in the case that this sheichit, which I knew sheichtim to do this, that will use his shechita knife to cut up his salad during lunch on his lunch break.
And therefore, just for that virtue of him doing it, regardless of what he do with his mind, but then did he also say...
It's not off his mind. If on Shabbos they have knife broke, they need to cut this out. They give his wife the shechita knife.
So he doesn't have to say anything
I doubt
before
that he
Bein
would give it to his wife.
He doesn't have to do anything about this mind thing before Bein Hashmashot.
If he's used it in actuality,
Right.
of course not. He's proven his point.
Or,
But we're saying, even if you didn't prove your point, you just had regret in the mind, and you decided, you know what, I'm going to use this knife for...
before Shabbos, he has to do that.
He's on pension, he's done his shechita, he has 15 knives. How many knives can he give as a present to people? He's keeping a few for himself. What's he going to do with them? He's not shechting anymore.
Yeah.
His hands shake, he can't shecht anymore.
Right. So that has to do that
So
before
he's now,
Shabbos.
before Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Before Shabbos, he thinks, okay, I'm hereby planning on using these knives now for cutting my salad. Yeah, there you go.
Can't change his mind after Shabbos, can he?
For the next
Back
Shabbos.
and forth.
Yeah, can you go, I think I'll preserve these. Is that allowed?
Here the author gives the final categorization of these two previous types of muktzah, which we said expensive, that is designated for forbidden use and you won't use for anything else, or merchandise that you won't use for anything else. And this muktzah is called muktzah machzis sarakis.
That translates again as
Muktzah set aside due to loss of money, or due to fear of it causing, of use of it causing loss of money.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's not the worry about the shochet knife. That's the
Sure it
knife
is.
that it's
Sure it is.
Valuable
Loss of money. The knife can go. The knife, he has to,
What about halachically? You
damage.
say you're not allowed. You're allowed halachically to actually use a shochet knife to cut a tomato.
Sure, you
Can
just have to make sure before you shecht that it's sharpened properly.
I see.
There's no restriction to use a shechita knife for something else. Okay, let's go through some examples brought in the Shulchan Aruch. Let's begin with the Sifhei. A whole bunch of examples in Sifhei. Then we're going to see about the Bris Milah knife in Sif Yud. Sifhei, Sivav. Okay, we're going to see a few examples.
Still in Shin Ches?
Yes.
Same Sachin?
Yes.
Okay.
308, Halacha 5. Chain sakin shel shchita. So based on everything Rabbi says, so too and therefore, a slaughter knife, a shel milah, and a circumcision knife, the isno shel svarim, and a knife that would be used by the scribes. This is, saparim, my bad, wrong translation. Scissors that were used by the saparim, by the barbers. Okay? The sakin shel seifrim, that's where the knife of the writers of scrolls, which they would use, which they would use to sharpen the quills. Since they're very particular not to use these knives for any other purpose, because they're they have very specific specifications in how they must be sharpened and remain sharp. So, since a person is particular not to use anything else on Shabbos, says you can't use it for its main purpose, you can't do a shechita, you're not expecting to have a meal, etc. It's forbidden to be moved, even for the need of itself or its space. Even if this knife is found together with all the other knives in the kitchen, it's stuck inside of this vessel. What are they called? What did I translate that here? A knife holder? A knife casing. Okay, whatever. You know what I'm talking about?
Even if what's it? Even if
casing, yeah, the casing you stick the knife into. Back in the day, they used to have like a block of That's what they had a block of wood, and you had 15 knives that were stabbed into it. So let's say I have this block of wood with the 15 knives stabbed into it, and one of them is the shchita knife. So I have one muksa knife. It says, we don't say that since it's together with all the regular knives of the kitchen, so therefore it has, well, let's just give it the same status, one for all. Right? No. Every knife has it's judged individually, and the shchita knife therefore would be no good. Nonetheless, the prohibition will only be to remove this muktzah knife from the casing. While all the other knives are inside of them, basically it doesn't affect this non-muktzah status of the other knives or of the casing. Okay, another example is given in Sifvav.
Doesn't affect, I didn't understand.
We're going to get to more details of the subject of an item that is holding a muktzah item will be discussed in length when we reach chapter 3:10, and it's going to be its own chapter here at the very.
So that's what I was referring to, the holder.
Yes, the holder, the knife holder.
On Shabbos, that's okay. Why would you want to use the knife holder?
You want to move it?
I want to move it somewhere.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I have 10 knives in there, I have one shchita knife, I want to move the whole thing.
I see, it's got other kinds of knives, I see.
Or I have a drawer with knives, including my shchita knife.
Right.
I want to open the drawer.
Right, that's allowed.
We'll see, that's a subject in and of its own.
Didn't it just say afilu to somebody?
Right, but he did mention if you removed all the other. Now, he mentioned a few conditions. We'll see, and there's also, this is a major contradiction to another halacha, which we have to then make peace with. Let's leave this aside until we get to it.
That happens a lot. We have drawers that we want to get to something, and there's like pens and things like this in there.
So we have to deal with that when we get to it. So too, the chisel that is used to crush spices, the love in areas and places that they're particularly not used for anything else, so it doesn't get dirty. Again, even though here, the reason why we're particular is not because of damage. We're not afraid it's going to get damaged. What damage is going to happen to a hammer? What's the damage that can happen to a hammer? Right? We're not afraid of damage. Here we are fearful of that it'll get dirty, and of course dirty the spices. Spices are very delicate, it can ruin our food. Unless it's defined in Muksa Kisses, it is designated for a particular use, which we can't do on Shabbos. You can't crush spices on Shabbos. And we are particular not to use it for anything else, for whatever reason. So it falls under the same status as Machzor Kisses. So what we automatically already learn from here is that it doesn't really have anything to do with how expensive it actually is, or any monetary loss being caused to the item. Notice that. It's very important for our general.
Even though the category sounds like that.
Correct, correct. But here we're giving examples of things. By merchandise, we explicitly said even if it's not very expensive. So it's a general term which is basically can go in a few directions. But what it generally means is that I'm particular not to use for anything else. In a place where we're not particular, we don't mind using this chisel for other purposes. You are allowed to use it for its own use. I want to break open some pistachios or or it's in the way. I want to put something down here. This is just like any other vessel that's there for forbidden use. As we will learn when we get to that category. Another example, blank paper.
So this is the case where you can use the hammer for the pistachios, but you wouldn't use it for another reason.
I can use it for the pistachios, yes.
You can use it.
Since I'm not particular,
Right.
therefore it's not that high level of muksa, which restricts it from all usages. Blank paper, which is designated for writing or printing paper, is muksa. Machmas chisaron kiss, due to fear of loss occurring to it if you would use it for something else. So we're particular not to use for any other purposes, maybe it'll get dirty. Furthermore, says the author, but another reason is, since we are particular not to use it for anything else, it therefore loses its status as a vessel. So let me explain this. There's a few points here regarding paper. The poskim of today discuss this, and even of already years ago, what's wrong with paper? Why is paper considered muktzah? Let's analyze the category of muktzah machzor and kiss and see, does it really fit in? And if it doesn't, then why are we saying here it's a problem? I understand that paper can get dirty and then become unusable, just like a tissue. A tissue can get dirty and then become, no one's going to use a dirty tissue to blow their nose. But is it something that we really care about? Do we really care if one piece of loose leaf paper gets dirty and gets, lost from use? If the answer is no, then it shouldn't be muktzah, because I'm not particular against using for other things.
Okay. Obviously, you can't use it for writing. Okay, so that's not, doesn't mean
That's so fine. It fulfills the first part, designated for forbidden use.
Okay, so now we're on the second part, the Alter Rebbe, second part.
Yeah, let's say a kid says, I want to make a toy
Airplane.
using paper. So that's itself a question. You form an airplane on Shabbos. So let's say, which some place can hold, that it's mutter. The question is the paper muktzah? Or let's say there's a bug, a nasty bug on the floor, and everyone's freaking out. I want to take a piece of paper, of printing paper, put it under the bug and get rid of it. There's a paper muktzah. So if this is expensive paper, you have some in printing houses. You have some very expensive paper. You have cream color. You have paper that can cost $1 a piece. So obviously that's expensive, and people are going to be very particular with that. Or we have a picture paper that's meant for picture printing. It's expensive paper. So obviously that would definitely fall into what the Alter is talking about. But a regular piece of printing paper, or loose leaf paper. So we can debate it. So some place can actually say, this whole thing was discussing paper back in the day, which was expensive. Paper back in the day was expensive. Today, paper is paper. It's like water. So therefore, it wouldn't fall under muktzah machzor and kiss. However, on the other hand, we can argue that no. Since paper is something that has its designation for writing, and in general, you would be particular, would you allow your entire stack of printing paper to be used?
No, not entire stack, but one paper we would.
Right, but
That's
so
what you
that's
are.
okay. So that's the thing.
The
Every individual paper, how do we view it? Do we view every individual paper as that one piece that you would allow, or do we view it as a whole, that it's part of the general group, that no, you are particular against anything happening to it and using it for something else? You understand? So it's not so simple. So there is room to say that even if paper is not expensive, and you're not particular on one individual piece, that it would retain a muktzah machzor and kiss status. Furthermore, here the Alter said there's another muktzah category that comes in.
It affects
Even if you knocked off the first one, there's still a second one, and that is as follows. We're going to learn in one of our coming up categories called Muksa machmas gufa, that an item which isn't a vessel is muktzah, such as a rock or a pebble. Why? Because it doesn't have a designated use.
An
So it's
item
off
which
my
is
mind.
not a vessel.
Correct. Doesn't have a designated use. An item doesn't have a use. Hasn't yet been created into a use. So here the author says something very interesting. Paper, of course, it's not just a piece of bark. It's gone through a whole process of how it's made. So it's definitely been designated. But it's not like a typical vessel, which in halacha, which has a vacuum, it's able to hold something. It's a plain sheet of wood. It's a plain sheet. Its vessel status is only due to the fact it's meant for writing on. It's designated for writing on, which is a use, so it has a vessel status. Once the writing becomes prohibited on Shabbos, it loses its vessel status and now becomes muksa machmas gufa, just like pebbles. It's a very interesting approach. But nonetheless, clearly according to the Alter Rebbe, the paper, any paper would be muktzah on Shabbos, either due to muksa machzor and kiss, or also due to muksa machmas gufa.
Blank paper.
Blank paper, correct. Now, if I designate for Shabbos for something, I put aside 10 pieces of loose leaf paper to be used to carry the bugs on Shabbos. Okay, I pre-designated it, no problem. It's not off my mind. If I designate them to make, paper airplanes, okay, you designate it, fine, it has a use. But so long as it's part of the pile of writing paper, it doesn't help on Shabbos someone change your mind and use it for something else. Okay, this is all referring to blank paper. We will see later regarding what about paper that I wrote stuff on. What about if I wrote Divrei Torah on a piece of paper? It's half blank.
Then I can't figure out if that makes it worse or better.
What if I have a notebook, 100 blank pieces of paper, and I began writing a Dvar Torah for Pashas Bereshis on the first page?
Before Shabbos.
Of course. What's the status of the notebook? I have here 99 pages that are blank. This is an interesting question.
Why does writing on it make it help anyway? By the way, that's the first.
Well, the second I write it, they go back to what I explained to you.
Purpose.
Right. I said to you before, blank paper is meant for writing. That's a designation, particularly not used for anything else. It loses status as a vessel because it's not can't be used anymore. Once I wrote it, and now it's a book. Now its purpose is not for writing, but for reading, which I can do on Shabbos as well. A lot of read Divrei Torah on Shabbos. The only thing is, but hey, there's another half a page that I have to fill in here. So the other half is designated for writing. So maybe half the paper is Muksa, half isn't. How does it work? So we're going to see later.
A drawer of things, maybe like a drawer.
Okay, we're going to see a few more examples. Let's go to the Bris Milah example. That's 33110. Shema Amad Aleph. Here. A short halacha right here. It's a few. Shema Amad Aleph. Keep going, we got a while. Like a big chunk.
Shin, Lamed, Aleph. Okay, here we are.
Ismo shel Milah Muksa Machzor and Kiss. A Milah knife is an MCK, Muksa Machzor and Kiss, which we have already stated earlier. But also Tatulin, if it's forbidden to be moved, it's only permitted to be moved for the sake of the circumcision. Not for the sake of hiding it or placing it in an undisclosed area. Even if you want to move it for its use or for its space, as I want to use the Milah knife for cutting some vegetables, not a good idea, just in case. Certainly not for meat at all, it is forbidden to be done, as is considered complete muktzah. Nonetheless, so long as it's still in the hand of the Mayhal, when he's using it to circumcise the Shayat, that's Nishana. He can carry it to wherever he wants to in order to place it there, to hide it there. Again, so long as it's in his hands. But it's forbidden for him to wash it even while it's in his hands. It's forbidden to wash a vessel unless it's for the need of Shabbos. What need is there to wash it now? If he has another Bris Milah and he's using the same knife, fine. If he doesn't have another Bris Milah, then he's not allowed to wash it. In any event, so from this halacha, we learn that the Alter Rebbe here, that it's not muktzah during the actual time of the circumcision. It is allowed to put it down wherever you want, but the moment you put it down, no longer can be picked up.
But in the process, the Moel has it in his hands, he can't use it for something else.
Correct. You shouldn't use it for anything else. Okay, we finished pretty much the inside material of Muksa Machzor and Kiss. There's not that much more information on the category of Muksa Machzor and Kiss here. And we basically now come to the different practical examples and different things that may fall under it. We'll continue this also next week. I just want to begin the idea of it. So let's again, to summarize. Muksa Machzor and Kiss is any item which is completely off one's mind from being used on Shabbos due to it being something designated for a use that's forbidden to do on Shabbos, such as merchandise to sell or shechita knife to slaughter. And I'm particular to not use it for anything else because I don't want any damage to happen to it or any loss to happen to it. The only exception to this is food. Food, even if it's merchandise set aside, I'm particular, you're really not particular. It's never off your mind. Anything that's Muksa Machzor and Kiss falls the category is complete Muksa, cannot be moved for any purpose, not for its space, not for its use if you change your mind to use it for something else, and certainly not to save from from damage. Okay, so let's go through here some examples. We had the Mila knife, the Shruta knife, the Safras knife, and the scissor of the barber. Inexpensive pens, right? The Ksoisa Shulchan, an expensive pen is Muksa and Kiss. We have some pens that can cost $100, $200, $500. It's designated for writing. I'm not going to use it for anything else. And therefore, it perfectly falls under the category. So it would be Muksa and Kiss. Or if it's an inexpensive pen, a regular pen that you buy, a big pen that you buy 20 for $5 or 20 for $3.
20 for a dollar.
20 for $1? Which store? A big pen.
It's designated for something, so it fails in the first screen, it's not designated.
So
for
it meets the first screen, it says for in use, but it's not expensive. It's not something I worry about. So if I have an itch in my back, I wouldn't mind using the pen to scratch myself. I wouldn't exactly take my $200 pen and use it to scratch my back.
Okay, but because it's not so expensive, you're not worried about scratching your back with it.
You're not worried about using it for other things. You use it to, I don't know, use it as a bookmark. You use it for whatever other use you can think of.
What if you don't use it for any? You just want to pick it up and twiddle with it or something? Is that
we already learned, and we'll learn this again, that twiddling things on Shabbos is, even if they're not muksa, is a problem.
Okay. So you have to, in order to make that...
Unless you're very nervous and you need
you have to have another use, you're going to use it for it, so you're not worried about losing, and then it's
or
not
the space, it's in the way.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a lower category of muksa, not the higher category, because it's inexpensive.
And moving a sitter from under, that's okay,
A wallet here, the Alter Rebbe gives, this is an example. We didn't read inside, but a wallet would be MMCK, Muksa Kiss, even if it does not contain any money, because it's designated for money and a person is very particular with it. So it would be considered muksa. Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa mentions all the following items, and once again, this is everything we're mentioning is really subjective to the person, as if he says, but I have a $500 pen, but I use it to scratch my back all the time. So for him, it's not MMCK, it's not this high category. So a few examples: a camera, a radio. I don't think those things exist today.
Cell phone.
Radio still exists today.
I don't know, probably find it somewhere.
Stamps.
Stamp.
A stamp is muksa and kiss.
Like money.
It's like money. It's not, you're particular not to use it for anything else. It can get ruined, so it's MMCK.
Cell phone fits in the category of radio and...
So we'll see cell phone. Let's go through his list. A parchment of a scribe, a bus pass, so a bus card. In particular, something can happen to it, you lose your money.
Or credit card.
Documents which are forbidden to be read on Shabbos, important documents that I'm not allowed to read on Shabbos, so you're careful, bills, etc. It's muksa and kiss. A check or money is almost muksa and kiss. Credit cards, muksa and kiss. New unattached tzitzis strings. I am particular not to use it for anything else. I want to stay nice and clean and kosher. I'm not using them for anything else. And I plan on attaching them to my tzitzis, to my talis, which is asur on Shabbos due to the time prohibition. So therefore, it retains this high category of muktzah. Pesach vessels during the year. It's an interesting stretch. He writes that the Pesach vessels, since they're meant for cooking, but you can't do on Shabbos, and you're particular not to use them for anything else because it's not Pesach. You want to get them chametz sticks to their MMCK. They end up being muksa and kiss.
What about vessels that you don't use on Shabbos? Vessels that are... Oh, I'm sorry.
Regular pots?
Yeah, regular pots.
Well,
you can't also use those on Shabbos.
I'm not particular against placing fruits in it or, using it to store something.
But if it's a real expensive pot, you would kind of be careful. That might...
If it's an expensive pot that you only use for actual cooking, then yeah, I would. An expensive butcher knife that you only use for cutting, fresh meat, raw meat. So these are all categories. Okay, the Mitzvah next we're going to go through different questions and answers we see here of the things that we learned.
What about cell phone?
So once again, it would depend. For me, this phone is considered Muksa and kiss. I wouldn't use this for anything else really. On the other hand, you can argue, sometimes they may use it as a placeholder, or sometimes they'll use it as,
Alarm? No, they can't use alarm. You can't preset a cell phone. Can you preset a cell phone to go off?
For Shabbos,
Yeah?
sure.
Oh, that's a good solution.
We learned it in the very first class.
Okay, so real life example, my daughter pulled a calendar, we have a calendar hanging on our wall. Regular calendar.
The calendar?
The calendar.
Well, is it designated for forbidden use?
Well, that's I try to think about that.
What would be the forbidden use of reading a
You're
calendar?
not allowed to plan ahead for things, whatever.
But I'm looking at it to know what time is on Kriya Shema, what time is Shabbos over, and it has a lot of permitted things in there
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
A lot of forbidden use.
Oh, that's good to know. Even if the use that was being used for was for forbidden use, to plan ahead, to look at the
There's
dates
no
for
issue to
when.
plan ahead so long as you don't talk about it and it's not a matter that's us to do. I'm allowed to say, on Shabbos, I plan on Wednesday of going to my friend's house and speaking to her about Hondo. Now let us say I plan on driving to my friend's house, or I plan on going to my friend's house to talk about planning a flight.
When Pesach when Pesach falls, no problem? Trip. You want to plan a trip that involves a flight? What?
As long as you avoid mentioning the words fly, train, bus.